Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Guys of Magic. This is Hunter and David. Say what up, David.
Yo, what's going on?
We are back this time doing the big boy edition of the Doctor Who Precon deck, starting with yours, David. That is the Masters of Evil. But before we get started with all of your stuff, just want to remind everybody to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you liked it, and keep up to date with everything else that we got going on in the description with our socials and Patreon and all that jazz. But David, take us through the Masters of Evil. What is the commander you're doing for the $300 upgrade, and what the deck wants to do?
Yeah, so we're going to be sticking with the same game plan that we did for the 100, just basically adding an extra $200 at it. If you did watch that video, I mainly just kind of focused on the mana base. I threw in 20 new cards, 11 of them were lands. I actually really like this deck straight out of the box, and the universes beyond commander decks I feel like are always a little bit odd in terms of upgrading, because I really want to make sure that I'm keeping the deck on theme while still giving it a little bit more of an oomph. So just a little bit of a disclaimer for this video. I'm not going to be throwing in a ton of new cards, really just kind of like some high impact ones that are going to work really well with the deck. So with that being said, we are going to be sticking with the face commander, and that is Davros, Dalek Creator. He is a blue, a black, and a red for a total of 4 mana, a legendary artifact creature, alien scientist. It is a 3/4 with menace. It also says that at the beginning of your end step, you create a 3/3 black Dalek artifact creature token with menace. If an opponent lost 3 or more life this turn, then each opponent who lost 3 or more life this turn faces a villainous choice. That means that you either draw a card or that player discards a card. So basically, the game plan here for the 300 is going to be very similar to that of the 100. Make sure that our commander gets in play, protect him, beat our opponents down, and then just kind of overwhelm the board state with a bunch of 3/3 menacing creatures.
Game plan sounds amazing to me. I always like my good old-fashioned combat damage. But if you guys haven't already seen the $100 upgrade video that David has been alluding to, check the description as well. You will find a link to that. But let's go ahead and get into these additions, David. Before we get started into the new additions, I just want to remind everybody this is a continuation of that $100 video. And on the screen, you will see all of the additions from the 100. But that is going to do it for the 100. Let's talk about the big boys, the 300. Show me what you got.
This deck is incredibly reliant on its commander for it to be able to really kind of get a whole lot of traction. So it is pivotal for this deck that we be able to keep him alive and make sure that he's just going to continue to do his thing, generating those tokens. And then it is wonderful that the creature itself also has menace and is capable of getting in for that initial 3 damage to kind of get the ball rolling on things. So the first 2 cards that I want to talk about, or the first actually just group of cards that I want to talk about, are all just dedicated solely to making sure that our commander stays alive, stays in play, and stays impactful. The first card here being Deflecting Swan, and this is 2 and a red for an instant. It says if you control your commander, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost, and you may choose new targets for target spell or ability. If your opponent tries to use a removal spell on your commander, you can use this to just be able to redirect that target and just kind of like, I don't know, take out their commander or some other threat instead. Very similarly, we also have the blue card from this cycle, and that being Fierce Guardianship. This is 2 and a blue for an instant. It says, if you control a commander, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost, and it says counter target non-creature spell. Basically the exact same thing here. We're going to be using this to counter one of our opponent's removal spells, maybe a board wipe. We just need to make sure that our board stays intact.
Yeah, protecting your commander is the name of the game. These are the 2 best cards to do that in the format, I'd say. Deflecting Swan and Fierce Guardianship, I can totally see why you threw them in the deck. What are some other instants you're throwing in here?
Yeah, so we're going to continue this train of making sure that our commander stays alive, just kind of having some extra protection up for him. The next card that I want to talk about is Mana Drain. This is 2 blue mana for an instant. It says counter target spell at the beginning of your next main phase. Add an amount of colorless mana equal to that spell's mana value. So this not only can counter something that would be really important for our opponent, but it also adds that extra mana surge that we're going to be able to get that following turn. So help us be able to cast something big and impactful, just like really kind of throw in for like a total shift of momentum here. Another one of the counter spells that we're going to be throwing in here is Swan Song. This is a single blue mana for an instant. It says counter target enchantment, instant, or sorcery spell. Its controller puts a 2/2 blue bird creature token with flying onto the battlefield. We don't really care about the 2/2 bird. It's not going to be able to do anything up against our army of Daleks. Realistically, it's actually not even going to be able to block because our creatures have menace. So it's totally fine that they're going to be able to get that and making sure that our stuff is still around. And then the last instant that I'm going to be throwing into this upgrade is Force of Negation, and this is 1 and 2 blue for a total of 3 mana. It is an instant. It says if it is not your turn, you may exile a blue card from your hand rather than pay this spell's mana cost. It also says counter target non-creature spell, and if that spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. So this one does have that flexibility in that it can be free so long as you're capable of pitching a blue spell.
Counter, counter, counter. We are running blue in the deck. You've got to protect your commander. These are the three best. Well, would you say they're the three best in the entire format?
You know what? Honestly, I am still a huge fan of good old-fashioned negate. And I think negate just might be my favorite counter spell in the entire game. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, these are all really solid options.
All right. Well, I like all the counter spells. I like all the protection. But what are some other permanent spells you got going on?
I'm going to be putting in a single enchantment, and this is just because our commander doesn't draw us enough cards, and that is Rhystic Study. So Rhystic Study is 2 and a blue for an enchantment. It says whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1.
Simple, to the point. Best card draw in Magic.
We also have one Planeswalker we're going to be including in this list, and this being Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge. Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge is 4 a blue and a black for a whopping 6 mana. It is a Planeswalker that enters the battlefield with 5 loyalty, and it says creatures and Planeswalker spells you cast have affinity for artifacts. Its first mode is a +2, in which it says that it deals X damage to each opponent where X is the number of artifacts you control and you gain X life. Its -3 says return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand, and its -8 says exile the top 10 cards of your library, put all artifact cards from among them onto the battlefield. Now, the real big thing about this card is, although it is kind of expensive, it does give our other spells affinity, and you're going to notice there's actually quite a bit of artifacts included in the deck, and that is going to include our commander, as well as all of the Dalek artifact creature tokens that it's going to be producing. So our spells are going to be quite a bit cheaper with this. And its +2 ability, which is going to help Tezzeret stick around, is going to have a massive amount of loyalty just kind of from the get-go. It's going to start to hit each of our opponents and draining them out. So we have the potential here to easily be able to trigger that minimum of 3 life to trigger the villainous choice. However, there is a very real possibility here that we can just use his plus as a way for us to just rapidly close out a game.
Yeah, that seems that plus is just so impactful. If you have a lot of Daleks just chilling, you're gonna get out of control crazy, and I am terrified to play against it.
Yeah, so he just serves as like a kind of an alternative win condition if we have a board state that's at least sizable enough or enough artifacts for us to have just kind of generally in play. Plus, I mean, the -3, the recursion aspect of things is pretty neat if we have a key artifact that ends up going to the graveyard.
Yeah, totally makes sense to me. And wrapping it up, I see some creatures here. What are the creatures we're throwing in?
Yeah, we have 2 small utility creatures that are going to be putting in this list. The first of which is Ketis, Emberclaw Familiar. This is 1 and a red for a legendary creature, Elemental Lizard. It is a 1/1, and it says whenever a commander you control deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to each other opponent. So with our commander being a 3/3 with Menace, if we can get in and be able to deal damage to one of our opponents, it will then deal that 3 damage to each of our other opponents and make all of them face that villainous choice. And then we also have Tiny Bones, Trinket Thief. This is 1 and a black for a legendary creature, Skeleton Rogue. It is a 1/2, and it says at the beginning of each end step, if an opponent discarded a card this turn, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. It also has a second ability on it, which you can pay 4 and 2 black for a total of 6 mana, and it says each opponent with no cards in hand loses 10 life. The second mode here is just kind of cute, to be completely honest. I don't think that we're going to be able to use this a whole lot, plus it's pretty mana intensive, but it can come up and be relevant from time to time. With our commander in play and our opponents facing villainous choices, they are either choosing for us to draw a card, or in this case, if Tiny Bones is in play, they will discard a card and will still draw a card. So it just kind of like adds a little bit more of a layer here and ultimately more card draw for the deck.
Yeah, gives you that ultimate choice of, hey, do you want me to draw or do you want to lose a card and also let me draw? I think the villainous choice there is just to let you draw.
Yeah, and that's kind of the downside is that it does really kind of like force your opponent's hand, but I mean ultimately card draw is still really important and impactful.
Oh yeah, and you got other cards in the deck that also kind of potentially makes them discards, so this could go off as well. But are those all the additions to the new 300 upgrade?
You know what? These are actually all the additions for the 300. Like I said at the very beginning of the video, I actually really like these universes beyond decks, just kind of like straight out of the box. I feel like upgrading them is just like a little bit odd for me because I really want to be able to keep the core of the deck. They're very unique. And for people who are fans of whatever lore they come from, I don't know, I just feel bad removing things. So I did focus primarily on some high dollar cards to throw into this upgrade. And I know that's not going to be for everybody's taste. But in order to just kind of like keep the spirit of the deck, I did think that it was important here.
Totally understandable. I totally agree. If you're looking to buy these Doctor Who decks, we all have said it in every video, I think. We recommend just kind of keeping it together. Play with it just straight out of the box. But we are doing upgrades, so let's get on with the cuts from the deck. It's the sad part. A lot of people are gonna not like this part because we're taking away their favorite cards and art and all that stuff. But again, if you guys haven't seen the 100, this is a continuation. So on screen, you will see all of the cuts from the $100 upgrade. Those are all staying the same, right, David?
Yes, those are all staying the same.
Right on. So let's get to the cuts for the $300 upgrade now. Kick it off.
All right, so this first one is a card that I'm actually quite a bit of a fan of, and a little disappointed that I decided to remove it from the deck, but it's just kind of expensive. This being Cybership, it comes in at 6 mana. It is an artifact vehicle. It's got 8 power and 8 toughness. It's also got flying. And it says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, put the top 2 cards of that player's library onto the battlefield face down under your control. They are 2/2 Cybermen artifact creatures, and this has a crew of 4. So basically, once you've been able to get in with this a single time, you're just going to be able to crew it with the tokens that you've been producing, and this is just going to get out of control really quick. I love this card. I think this card is really cool, but for 6 mana, I just think it's a little bit too snowbally and a little bit too late in the game, and you do have to be able to at least make contact with this, given that it does have flying, and it is an 8/8, so it shouldn't hopefully be too difficult, but I just felt like it was a little bit slow.
Yeah, getting it down for 6 and then having to tap your stuff to crew this to swing in. And unfortunately, your stuff will be tapped, so you can't be on block duty for whatever reason. Yeah, I can see vehicles aren't always the most strong, so I can see why you're cutting this one.
The next card I'm going to be removing is the Ranny. This is 1, a blue, a black, and a red for a total of 4 mana. It is a legendary creature Time Lord Scientist, and it is a 3/4. It says whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you create a red aura enchantment token named Mark of the Ranny attached to target creature. That token has enchant creature, and enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and is goaded. It also says whenever a goaded creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, investigate. So there is a ton to unpack with this card. There is kind of like a minor sub theme of goading in this deck. I think that it's probably just included in here to make sure that you have open lanes for your combat damage. But given the fact that our creatures have menace, I don't really think that we're going to have to super goad our opponent's things. And then even on top of that, goad is a weird mechanic. Whenever you get down to just kind of like 1v1, I don't really want my opponent's creatures to get pumped and then just at that point, Goad doesn't do anything. They're just going to start swinging at me because there's no other opponent in play for them. So that kind of pump effect is it can be quite a bit of a downside.
And if things are not being goaded, if that creature with the red aura enchantment dies, then this card is doing absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's still a really neat card. I like it for the precon, just kind of like straight out of the box. But I don't know. It's not really doing a whole lot for me.
Yeah, I get that. What else are we cutting?
So the last creature we're going to be removing here is Clockwork Droid. This is 2 mana for an artifact creature robot. It is a 3/1, and it says you may exert Clockwork Droid as it attacks. When you do, it can't be blocked this turn, and you scry 1. This is just kind of like a cheap little creature that you can get into play to make sure that you're going to be able to proc your commander. The only real problem that I see with this is that it's kind of slow in that you have to exert it, so you're only going to be able to use this every other turn. And in the mid to late game, this is not a card that I want to drop. Uh, Coming in the mid to late game, I mean, it's just really not going to be all that impactful. I would have rather just drawn a different card, so that's part of the reason why I'm going to be cutting it.
Some cards are just uncommons for a reason, David.
And then from here, we're going to be moving on to some of the instants and sorceries that I wasn't really the biggest fan of. The first one here is Doomsday Confluence. This is X, X, and a black for a sorcery. It says choose X. You may choose the same mode more than once. It's got 3 modes for you to choose from. The first mode here says each player sacrifices a non-artifact creature. The second mode says create a 3/3 black Dalek artifact creature token with menace. And the final mode says each opponent discards a card. And I know what you're probably thinking. You're like, why in the world is he removing this card? This does so much, and everything on this does exactly what we want this card to be doing. What it does, like, I don't know, it just fits really well in the deck. Sacrificing non-artifact creatures is totally fine, especially considering we're going to have a critical mass of them, so this isn't really going to impact us a ton. Making the Daleks obviously is great for our deck, and then having each of our opponents discard cards is also fantastic. The reason really why I'm choosing to get rid of this is because of how incredibly mana intensive this is. This is 3 mana to do one of these modes, 5 mana to choose for 2, and then from there it just kind of gets completely unobtainable. I just think that this card is a bit too mana intensive. I see why it had to be an X and an X instead of just like the single X and black. I don't know. I just think that this card becomes way too expensive way too quickly, and this is not a deck that is like super big on mana. It's not running like your typical like Cabal Coffers kind of package where we're capable of generating mana up into like the 20, 30, 40 range. So I just don't see it with this card.
Yeah, those double X spells, they definitely make you go through your mana quickly. I am completely in agreement with you. This is very mana intensive.
Speaking about mana intensive, the next card is also going to be kind of up there. This is Great Intelligence's Plan for 4, a blue, and a black, a total of 6 mana. This is a sorcery, and it says draw 3 cards, then target opponent faces a villainous choice. They discard 3 cards, or you may cast a spell from your hand without paying its mana cost. Once again, you're probably wondering what in the world is going on here. Why are we not choosing to do this? Well, see, here is the thing. Drawing 3 cards can be pretty powerful. However, your opponent on this villainous choice is going to choose whatever mode works best for them. Having them discard 3 cards is really not that big of a negative if our commander is already making them discard cards per turn. There is a chance that they may not have 3 cards in their hand to begin with. So I don't know. I just look at it like this card is cool. It's a neat effect, but there is a chance that it's not really all that impactful. And 6 mana to draw 3 cards, not my favorite rate there.
Yeah, that's a pretty expensive rate.
Next up, go ahead and put your hate down in the comments below because I'm going to be removing this card, and I know quite a bit of people were pretty high on it. This is Cyber Conversion. It is 2 blue mana for an instant. It says turn target creature face down. It's a 2/2 Cyberman artifact creature. This is a 3-color deck, and having access to the 2 blue pips is going to be a little bit more challenging than what it would be, obviously, if we were playing mono blue or if we were playing a 2-color deck. And I think that there's just better removal out there, and that's some of the removal that we've already included in our 100. So I'm actually not the biggest fan of this card. Generally speaking, I feel like it's a little bit just, I don't know, not doing enough for me. And if we are using this on like an opponent's commander, they still have the ability to be able to get it back. It just kind of creates like an odd effect where now our opponents don't want to swing in and deal damage, or we've incentivized our opponent to just like save up another blocker. I don't know. I'm actually not a very big fan of this card. And then the last sorcery that we're going to be removing here is Ensnared by the Mara. This is 2 and 2 red for a total of 4 mana. It is a sorcery, and it says each opponent faces a villainous choice. They exile cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. Then you may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Or that player exiles the top 4 cards of their library, and Ensnared by the Mara deals damage equal to the total mana value of those exiled cards to that player. I don't generally like cards that are random or kind of like chaos-y like this. I just feel for the most part there is a whiff potential, and because this is a sorcery, it's a one-time effect. I really don't want to pay 4 mana to potentially not really do anything, or just kind of like low roll my opponent and have them take 1 or 2 damage. I don't know. I just feel like there's enough of a risk here where I don't want to run this card.
Yeah, I'm in that same boat. I know if I played this against my opponent would say, I'll lose the total life equal to the mana value, and they'll flip over 4 lands.
Yep, and that right there is exactly why I'm cutting this.
For 4 mana, it did nothing. That would be a bummer. I know there's the random factor, but I agree with you. Moving on, I know we added some other permanents. Let me see some more permanents that are leaving.
Yeah, so as we continue, we do have two other cards going to be getting the axe here, and they are both enchantments. The first one is the Toymaker's Trap. This is 2 and a black for a total of 3. It is an enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, secretly choose a number between 1 and 5 that hasn't been chosen. If you do, an opponent guesses which number you chose, then you reveal the number you chose. If they guessed wrong, they lose life equal to the number they guessed, and you draw a card. If they guessed right, sacrifice the Toymaker's Trap. Um, there is so much I don't like about this card. First off, I know my luck. So my opponent will always guess the number on their very first try, and this would have been a 3-mana do nothing card. And if they don't do that, there is a pretty good chance that they're just going to guess, I don't know, and not take a whole lot of damage or not take enough damage to proc my commander, in which case this doesn't do anything. I don't know. I guess that it has the potential to, like, best case scenario, it hits for like 10 damage and it draws you a couple of cards. But
Yeah.
it's not great.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree here. This is a very weird card. It definitely deserves the axe.
I also don't like that, like, there is a certain point where it's just like your opponent knows what you've named because you can only secretly name the number one time.
Yeah. You can only at this card gets progressively worse the longer it's on the field.
And it's not great to begin with. The last enchantment they're going to be removing here with some of the coolest artwork is Day of the Moon. This is 2 and a red for an enchantment saga. It has 3 lore counters, and they are all exactly the same. So it says choose a creature card name, then go to all creatures with the name chosen for Day of the Moon, which means until your next turn, they have to attack each combat, and they have to attack another player or a player other than you. This is neat if you are playing up against like token strategies where your opponents have a lot of the same named creature. However, just to like at face value, potentially just go 3 creatures for several turns, like, I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of this kind of an effect. I'm not the biggest fan of Goad to begin with, and definitely not stapled onto an enchantment that is kind of restrictive and is just going to go away.
I think this card would be great against this deck.
Yeah, exactly that. I think this card would be fantastic against this deck. Name Dalek, and then half my things have to swing in another direction.
Exactly. That's a interesting card to add into this deck. But is that going to do it? Is that all the cuts from the deck?
That is in fact going to do it. I tried to keep this one a little bit more just kind of like short and sweet. I do think that this deck is a ton of fun just kind of straight out of the box, and because of how like just on theme and how powerful I think that the face commander is here, you can upgrade this deck and have this be really powerful for just a couple key pieces that you're throwing in here. So I'm a huge fan of this one. I am super excited to do our $300 gameplay battle of this, which will also get posted on this YouTube channel here before too long. So make sure you keep an eye out for that one.
Absolutely. But quick question, David. We've given you $300. What is the total amount of the entire deck?
We have spent $294 building this.
That's awesome. Before we finish up, any final thoughts on the deck itself?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I think the deck is a lot of fun. I don't know. It's just generally like a Grixis beatdown, and who doesn't love that?
That's so true. Go out and pick up this deck and have your own Grixis beatdown fun. Well, like we've said throughout the entire video, if you wanted to see the entire deck list of this $300 upgrade, check the description down below. Also in the description, you will find links to all of our social media accounts. That's TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. Guys, a match for each one. And we also have a Patreon. That's right. If you wanted to support us more than you already do, check that too for some extra bonus stuff. Also, comment down below. Do you agree with these cuts? Do you agree with these additions? Do you think David made a great deck? Let us know. Always interested to hear your guys' opinions. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next video, hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Peace.
Bye bye.